Hello and a warm welcome to everybody. We would like to wish everyone a good morning, a good afternoon, or a good evening, depending on where you are in the world today. My name is Jamie, and I'm one of the co-founders of Safeopedia. Safeopedia's mission is to support the EH&S professionals, operational folks, and any safety-minded individuals with free information, tools, and education. I'd like to extend a huge thank you to those dedicated professionals for the great work they do on a daily basis. Today, we're very proud to present How to Mitigate Summer Construction Hazards, What You Need to Know. This Safeopedia webinar has been made possible by Cordova Safety Products, a preferred manufacturer member of Safety Network. Safety Network demands excellence, so demands Safety Network. It is now my pleasure to introduce to you today's presenter, Bryan McWhorter. Bryan is a productivity expert and safety professional with over 10 years experience in implementing and teaching safety, leadership, and productivity tools. He gained much of his knowledge and experience through over 30 years as a supervisor, safety officer, and senior trainer in the manufacturing industry at the largest fluorescent lighting factory in the world. We are extremely grateful to have Bryan working with us at Safeopedia for the last several years. We also are very grateful to have John Mazzola during the Q&A session on the line. John has been in the PPE industry for 17 years and with Cordova for a little over 13 years. He is currently Cordova's Director of Industrial Sales for the East Region. He's a Marine Corps veteran and loves to keep busy with his 2 kids and 2 grandkids. We now invite you to sit back, relax, and enjoy the presentation. With that, Bryan, my friend, please take it away.
Thank you, Jamie. I'd like to thank everyone for joining us today. A special thank you to SafetyNetwork.me and to Cordova Safety Products for supplying this wonderful information. And again, a special thanks for everyone that's tuned in. We value your time, so we'll definitely give you some good information. So with that, let's get into it. How to mitigate summer construction hazards. We got 5 main points that we're going to look at. First one are the hazards we need to consider while working outdoors during the summer. And everything always begins with that hazard assessment. No matter what you're looking at safety, that's always step 1. Number 2, high visibility clothing and tape. When being outdoors, struck by hazards are a real threat, so give some attention to that. Then number 3, workers versus Mother Nature. There's just a lot more we got to deal with being outdoors than being indoors usually. Number 4, PPE considerations. Almost all work requires some form of PPE when we're talking about construction or working outdoors or even in manufacturing. But what we want to do is find PPE that really doesn't add any more burden than is necessary. And then that 5th one, keeping your head. Again, we'll give a little bit of attention to what we wear on our head. Again, with the idea of protecting us without adding any more burden than is necessary. Okay, so let's go to that number 1 step. Like I said, when you look at just the basics of safety, it always begins with a hazard assessment. OSHA expects not manufacturers, but employers to keep their workers safe no matter what field you're in. Whenever I'm teaching safety, I'll usually spend some time making sure that people understand the difference between a hazard and danger. The reality is we can be around hazards all day long and never be in danger. As long as we have a control measure in place to keep people safe, once that control measure is disregarded, you've just crossed from hazard to danger. So it starts with that hazard assessment. What is the risk associated with that hazard? Then making sure we have a control measure in place. Now, for our discussion today, we got 2 main categories that we're going to look at. And that's environmental related, those that just kind of come from being outdoors, and then work related. So, you know, environmental related, we've got dealing with the weather and the wildlife, so to speak. But work related, you know, we've got that struck by hazard that we mentioned. As I said before, OSHA is going to expect that you've done hazard assessments and you're keeping people safe for whatever type of work you're doing. So for instance, if you have people using jackhammers, you know, you've got to have hearing protection because of the loud noise. We'll talk a little bit here in a while about struck by hazards, but high visibility is important. Again, I'm just touching on a few things here because again, you should have a hazard assessment that you've done for the work you're doing. But when you move your operation, like from indoors to outdoors, then things like slip, trip, fall hazards can kind of become more prevalent. Indoors, we tend to have like 5S or go to organization, but if we're moving our operation around, like in road work or some type of construction or landscaping, then we can create some of the hazards that we're going to deal with. So that's where having good work instructions, standardized work, and just good operation, and we'll talk more about that in detail here pretty soon. But these are things we need to look at. And also considering, distance from help. If you're out working away from, hospitals, or you always want to consider how far you are from medical services, and make sure that you have, good first aid kits and just some of the basics, and your people trained on how to respond just in case there is an emergency. So again, that hazard assessment is that all important beginning. And again, I reiterate, no matter what we're dealing with in terms of safety, it's always going to start with having a good hazard assessment in place. Okay, when working in the great outdoors, again, we've got those biological hazards. I live in the state of Texas, and we have all of these. One of the last companies that I worked with in terms of safety, they dealt with rebuilding and working with transformers. So they'd be in fields and open a transformer, and it wasn't uncommon to have black widow spiders or a hornet's nest inside it. So whatever the environment, if your people are around plants that could be poisonous, like poison oak, ivy, or sumac, again, making sure that, again, your employees recognize these. If they need some repellents, provide them. If you have any employees that have allergies, again, checking the pollen count, things like that are important. Bee stings, if you have anyone that's allergic to bees, making sure that that EpiPen is handy, and that someone else is even trained on how to give it to them if needed. Again, in the great state of Texas, we do have rattlesnakes. We had one that even got into a building last year. So again, these are the basics for being outdoors, just adding these in terms of your hazards, making sure you have a game plan in place. Okay, number 2, high visibility clothing. This kind of crosses both categories. It's definitely from being outside and goes along with the type of work that we're doing. Struck by hazards is a real threat. If you look at that top statement here, that motor vehicle crashes are the first and second leading cause of death in every major industry group. I first came across that around 2008, and it pretty much stays that way. So we don't want workers to look like ninjas, no art of invisibility. We want them grabbing attention. If passing motorists, if their eye isn't captured by the clothing that workers are wearing, then we didn't do a good enough job of making them high vis. If you look at that bullet, 313 pedestrian worker fatalities in 2017. Now, that's not just work zone, but that's all pedestrian workers. But that's a pretty significant number. And I'll show you some more statistics as they tie to work zones. But the main point is we want high visibility. We'll talk a little bit more about that in terms of clothing, but that high vis yellow and orange reflector material, making sure the workers have everything they need to help separate traffic. Training is a very important part of this as well. If you've got workers that are interacting with moving vehicles, like backing up trucks and things along this line, they're required to have something called spotter training. In spotter training, they learn hand signals, how to maintain communication and eyesight with the driver, and how to gain confidence and confidence in doing this safely. Same thing if you have workers that are really directing traffic, they need flagger training. Because again, this is a very important job, and you want to make sure they're competent and confident to be able to keep workers safe and direct traffic. So again, training is extremely important with this. That standard work instructions and training is so important, especially again, where you're moving your crew around outdoors. You need standard work instructions because they help guide us, keep us from going off, shooting off the hip. We want to identify problems each day in advance and make sure the workers are safe. When we show up for work, our mind is on getting the work done. We're not thinking safety. That's why it's so important to have those toolbox talks at the start of a shift. There's something in our psyche with all of us where we never think we're going to get hurt. It's just not going to happen to me. When I got out of bed this morning, I broke my record for the most days spent on the planet without dying. So what are the odds I'm going to do something today that's going to change that and cancel my tomorrow? So again, it's just how we live. Safety is either proactive or it's inactive. In other words, you have to constantly be fusing it into what you do, or it will be disregarded and people will just kind of forget about it. So standard work instructions, good training, toolbox talks, all extremely important. And that last bullet item, I wanted to touch on that lone worker policy. I would really suggest having something along that line. Now, I know there are a lot of jobs where we do have lone workers, someone going along reading meters or things along this line. It makes sense to do it by themselves. But if you're talking construction work, now you've got people that are doing, maybe heavy, intense labor, maybe using power tools under a hot summer sun. There you definitely need a buddy system. We want to be looking out for each other. Someone doing hard work with tools by themselves is a recipe for disaster. So again, we want people to be together. Okay, I mentioned that I'd show you some more statistics. Now, these are basically on work zone fatalities and crashes. So if you look at 2017, just in work zones, 126 fatalities. And they give you an average here of 107 over the last 3 years. And I've watched these over the many years that I've been a safety professional. It's pretty much the same. The main lesson here is when you're outside anywhere around moving vehicles, we want high visibility. We want work instructions. We want good training, and we want people looking out for each other. Once again, I'll mention that, remember, our minds are on getting the work done. We're being paid to get something accomplished. So that's where our focus of attention is going to be. So at the start of that shift and through everything we do, we need to infuse safety. Again, safety is largely behavioral. Remember, most studies show that about 90% of injuries are from a control measure being disregarded. So we've got to, again, constantly infuse safety into what we do. Part of that high visibility is making sure that workers have what they need, again, to draw attention to their safety. So again, if you are have a crew that is constantly moving around, as part of what they should carry with them in their trucks, make sure that you have checklists for these things and that they're well stocked with, the high vis tape, fencing material, things that, again, provide a visual barrier to help separate them from traffic. Again, we want them to have the pylons and the different things that they need to help direct the behavior of motorists and keep them safe. So high visibility and creating barriers is a big part of this. Again, I've touched on the high vis, and you'll see as one of the major things of actually this talk. Again, no ninjas. We want people to grab the attention, the sight of motorists. So everything that they wear should be high visibility. We're looking for that safety orange, that safety yellow, reflector material. From back braces to vests. We want things that grab the attention of motorists, that reflect light. I love that there are even high vis gloves these days. So when people are moving their hands, they've got that high vis yellow and orange or reflector material. So again, it grabs attention, and that's what we want. We want everything. When again, you've got workers out anywhere near motor vehicles, we want them grabbing attention. And again, this is something you should look at the beginning of the shift, making sure that workers are wearing things that should grab attention. Okay, let's move on to number 3, workers versus Mother Nature. And again, this is one of those things that we can easily kind of overlook. But when you're, again, doing your work in the great outdoors, not only do you have the sun, the UV rays, and the heat, but you also have severe weather to deal with, possibly high wind, fog, rain, lightning, hail, tornadoes. And the reason it's important to give this some thought is, once again, we as humans will tend to not respond quick enough. Again, I go back to that fact that we never think we're going to get hurt. So our bells and whistles to warn us, in our mind, just don't go off that quick. Our spider sense for dealing with severe weather just doesn't seem to kick in. Again, if I look back to my own history of working with safety with groups, working outdoors, I noticed that they usually will respond to severe weather way too late. So as part of your emergency action plan, you need to have this stuff outlined. Once again, OSHA expects us to have a game plan in place for any hazard our employees could be exposed to. That includes severe weather if you're in a place where this could happen. Again, even just looking at rain and lightning, if you can hear thunder, there is the threat of lightning. And lightning is the second cause of death in terms of weather, right behind flooding. So again, if you can hear thunder, you might have it in your action plan that, you know what, we head indoors until the threat is passed. Again, tornadoes, whatever the possible weather for severe weather for the environment you're in, just draw out a plan and have it as part of your emergency action plan. So you're giving people guidance. Otherwise, like I said, you can expect them to wait too long. But if they know in advance, hey, when the, say in case of a tornado, for a watch, we're listening to the radio, and once a tornado's been sighted and the alarms go off, everyone heads to shelter. If you have it black and white, you can count on your people using it. Hey, that human factor, this is so important because again, our bodies and our ability to handle things changes just based on lifestyle and habit. You might have someone who is a very healthy, good, strong worker and used to dealing with intense labor and the hot sun, but they stay up too late the night before drinking beer with their buddies. They're dehydrated, sleep deprived, and now you have a problem. Again, our being healthy and our health basics really go a long way to being able to fend off fatigue and adverse weather conditions. I want to talk for a second about this heat acclimation. Again, this is a very important topic to realize and understand. According to OSHA, it takes an average of 5 days to a week to become acclimated to heat. And if you have a person whose body is acclimated versus one who is not, these are two totally different machines. When your body is acclimated to heat, your body's core temperature will deal with the heat without raising as high as someone who's not acclimated. You'll start sweating sooner and you'll sweat better or more effectively. Your blood circulation near the skin will be better, releasing heat. So again, our body adapts. The strain on your heart will be less. So again, we want to consider if an employee has gone on vacation and they've come back, again, we need to keep an eye on them. They probably lost some of their acclimation. Same if you're filtering in new employees to a job where you've got a seasoned crew that's used to the heat. Again, you need to watch out for that individual because they are not acclimated. So again, just something to consider. Heat is still one of the main topics of this because again, in dealing with summer construction, this is something outdoors you just can't seem to get away from. And it's real important to understand that heat index. Again, here in the state of Texas, it's very common to have days where we'll have the temperature around 100 degrees. Yesterday afternoon, I was looking at the temperature when I checked was about 98. The humidity was around 48, so we had about 105 heat index. So this is just something, if you have people working outdoors or even indoors in a non climate controlled environment, you want to know what that heat index is because in all honesty, this is the real thing they're going to be exposed to. That's what their body feels. So we need to understand the threat level and keep people really in tune with the condition and make sure they understand the threat of heat related illness. Again, when it comes to heat-related illness, I think of that old saying, an ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure, and it really doesn't cut it with this. If you succumb to heat-related illness such as heat exhaustion or heat stroke, not only is it life-threatening at those levels, but you will be susceptible to that for the rest of your life. So we want to keep people from getting to that level. So it's all about prevention. So first is really good training, knowing that heat index, what they're being exposed to. And then you want to think duration and intensity. What's the duration of time they're going to spend in the sun or in the heat? And what's the intensity level of the work they're doing? If someone's not doing really intense work, they're outside observing or just doing light work, that's really different than if they're doing some really heavy, intensive labor and construction out under that hot sun. So you need to plan accordingly. Drinking fluids every 15 minutes. If it's very intense work, you want to include fluids with electrolytes to replenish those. If people are wearing hard hats and heavy PPE and doing again hard work, you need to provide shade where they can go and take those hard hats off and cool down a little bit before getting back to work to again be able to manage this and stay ahead of it. NIOSH and OSHA collaborated and put together a really neat heat safety mobile app. So whatever phone style you have, you can go to your app store and download this, and I would highly suggest you do it. When I talked about looking at the heat index yesterday, I did it on that mobile app. And not only does it immediately pull up where you're at it'll show you immediately what your temperature is, your humidity, and what the heat index is, and it does it in a way that it shows what the threat level is. It also has a lot of great information for staying hydrated and just dealing with heat-related illnesses. So awesome tool. One of the things I love with these webinars is we give out good information, but if I can also provide you with some resources, again, that's also fantastic. Cooling relief, I am a huge fan of these. It seems like everywhere I've ever worked as a safety manager, I've always dealt with heat. It's just, been part of the environments I've been in. And we discovered these cooling rags. I was first exposed to them back when dealing with manufacturing, and I've used them with workers outside and inside, and they're fantastic. The way these work is, if you took like an infrared thermometer and put it on the skin of someone who's working in heat, it's going to register around 100 degrees. These fabrics, once you wet them down, might be somewhere around like 65 degrees. So you put that on your skin and you got two benefits immediately. Psychologically, it feels good, and physiologically, it's actually cooling you down. So these are fantastic. Working in the heat, even if you're a runner, these things are awesome. And part of the way these things work is by cooling pulse points. A pulse point is where your blood flow is close enough to the skin where you can measure your pulse, like on the side of your neck or on your wrist. Having one of these rags on a pulse point helps cool the body down. Again, remember, your blood flow near the skin is one of the ways we release heat and cool our bodies. So these just kind of help your body to do what it's naturally trying to do anyway. So again, something to look into. For hard hats, having something like this underneath really does help tremendously. Okay, number 4, PPE considerations. Man, for almost every type of construction work, you're going to have PPE. I mean, gloves, hearing protection, hard hats are all common fare, glasses. So the idea is to do your research, talk to your distributors, find PPE that is high visibility and provides as minimal amount of discomfort as possible for the work that they're doing and for the environment they're being exposed to. So again, protecting from the rain and heat. We want as light a weight material as possible, but also high visibility. Giving some attention to the head. Again, we got to protect the melon, but we don't want to add to that discomfort. Again, in heat, our body releases heat through our head. So we don't want to give any more protection than is necessary. Now, what I mean by that is if a bump cap is sufficient versus a hard hat, just put on the bump cap. There's a lot of work where you do have to have hard hats. Luckily, hard hat construction has come a long way in the last many years, where now you have hard hats that are lighter weight, good suspension systems that are comfortable, and they're ventilated, so they allow air to circulate, under them. Now, again, if you have think of that intensity and duration. If you've got really heavy, intense labor in the sun, you might want to, again, allow them time, periodically to go take that hat off and relax a little bit. Also, look at those fabrics that you can wear in conjunction with your hat to protect you from the sun and help keep you cool. Looking for hats, again, with brims to protect from the sun. Again, there's a lot out there. Work with your distributor. Remember those two goals. You've got to provide the PPE to keep them safe from the hazard, but we don't want to provide any more discomfort than is necessary. Okay, eye protection. Again, almost all the work we're going to do, we're going to need something that protects our eyes. So again, safety glasses are pretty much common fare. But again, this technology has gone a long way. You want to, if you can, find something lightweight with fog protection. Again, if you have some that work as sunglasses, protecting you from UV ultraviolet rays is also fantastic. You want to have different types because, again, everyone has different comfort levels. And remember, if they're required to have safety glasses as PPE, this is something you'd be required to provide for them. You might look at having safety glasses that will go over prescription glasses as well. Dust goggles have come a long way. I've actually researched a lot of these. And there are now lightweight dust goggles which have kind of a felt band or a light band that goes around the glasses to make them seal around your face. So again, working outdoors, keeping away from dust or small things that can get in your eye, those are fantastic. So again, something to consider and to look at. This is something really important too when it comes to working outdoors. Looking at the type of shirts, jackets, vests, it still goes around those two things of you're looking for something that is comfortable to wear, so very lightweight, and is high visibility, high vis. When I talk about comfortable, lightweight, and dealing with heat, you want fabrics that do not soak up sweat. When our bodies sweat, that sweat evaporates, that's how we cool ourselves down. The sweating isn't what cools you, it's when that sweat evaporates. So if you have thick clothing that soaks up that sweat, you're impeding your body's ability to cool down. That's why that quick dry moisture wicking fabric is so prevalent these days when it comes to athletes and apparel for work outdoors. So if you can find apparel that is lightweight, quick drying, moisture wicking, that has that high vis for, that strong safety orange, safety yellow, reflector material. Again, we've got our bases covered. We're providing lightweight material that breathes. So again, the sweat can evaporate, keeps them safe in the heat, and they're visible. Again, no ninjas. We want to make people stand out as much as possible. Even back braces, gloves. I love it. If we can dress people from head to toe where they grab attention, that's the name of the game. So hopefully we provided you with some good information. The idea again is to start with that hazard assessment for the environment your workers are in, the type of work they're doing, and then make sure that you've got the control measures in place. And then again, start your days with those toolbox talks and do everything you can to proactively drive safety and regularly make sure control measures are being followed. So with that, we'll go ahead and take some questions.
Great, thank you, Bryan. You really do have something against ninjas, I take it. Yeah,
No
being a
art of
black.
invisibility for working outdoors.
Yeah, true. Well, thank you so much for that. Great information. We do have quite a few questions that have come in. So reminder to the audience, if you do have any questions for Bryan or John, yeah, get them in and we'll answer them as best we can. So the first question comes in from Jason, and Jason asks, I see safety vests referred to as flame resistant and self-extinguishing. What is the difference and which one should I use? Great question. Maybe John, do you
Jamie,
want to
I
answer
can
that
take
one?
that. This is John from Cordova Safety Products. There are two types of references in the question: a flame-resistant safety vest and a self-extinguishing safety vest. The self-extinguishing safety vest is simply a vest or a shirt that has been treated with a chemical treatment to allow the vest to extinguish. You can liken that to the treatment by or on draperies, for example. The flame resistant safety vest is the more complicated version, and it is made out of an inherently flame resistant material. Some of you in the distribution or end user community may recognize the name Glenguard. These are what are commonly referred to as modacrylic vests, and they have an HRC rating, and they're worn in situations where there could be an arc flash danger. These products are much, much more expensive than a simple self-extinguishing vest.
Great, thank you, John. Let's see here. Bryan asks, and maybe this is a question for Bryan, how do we combat trades, long hours, and fatigue management?
Oh, that kind of goes under that preventive. For one thing, again, watching out for each other is important, but good training and standard work. Again, if we understand that heat is going to be one of the main factors we got to deal with, and once again, I've got a background of working around heat, and when we started really training our people, providing lots of fluids and watching each other, we noticed that our heat related illnesses dropped considerably just through again, making sure that we were very proactive. So think in terms of that as duration and intensity. The more intense the work, the hotter and longer the duration, you're going to have to provide more breaks, make sure your people are acclimated to the heat. And again, this is all about being proactive, staying ahead of it. Hopefully that helps you out. And I would also recommend, having that app and making sure that people understand the level of heat and the danger, so that again, they see the importance of staying hydrated and watching out for each other.
Great, thank you, Bryan. Well, look at this. Another Bryan asks, do you recommend working alone in the dark? And what PPE or visual audio aids will help in light hazard environments such as sawmills?
To me, that still kind of goes under the manufacturing, and it's still all the same principles come into play. Um, Darkness can be viewed as a hazard, by itself. So, and again, I've seen where OSHA cited people because of injuries where, there wasn't proper lighting provided for someone. So again, a lone worker, you need to look at the type of danger that person is exposed to. For instance, in some manufacturing environments, because of the equipment people are going to be exposed to or around, they won't allow a lone worker. I've known some manufacturing places where, and sawmill might be along this line, where if you have a department with 2 people, that one person calls in sick, if you can't put someone else in there to where you have 2 people, they shut down the department. Again, it just depends on the intensity and the risk factor of the intensity of the labor, the risk of, from any of the operations that are prevalent there. So again, provide the lighting. It's never a good idea to not have sufficient lighting. That is one of the things that OSHA looks at. And then uh, when it comes to everything else, just providing the right PPE for the work that they're doing. And again, the lone worker is not a good idea if you have heavy equipment or a risk of someone getting hurt and being alone. Kind of a long-winded answer, but hopefully that helped you.
No, that's great. Thank you, Bryan. A couple people mentioned there's an echo. I don't know, maybe John and I will mute our microphones if Bryan's talking, and Bryan, if you can mute while John is talking. That would be greatly appreciated. All right, Kevin has a question here. When should you consider implementing medical surveillance for outside workers? Maybe Bryan, if you could talk a little bit about that.
Well, again, when you're doing your hazard assessment, if you are far away from medical services, if nothing else, you want to have it planned where how to respond to a medical emergency. The only other thing other than responding in terms of phoning as part of your standard work, I guess let me address this quickly. As part of your standard work, you want people to be able to respond. If there's a severe injury, you got someone who's staying with the injured person, someone who's calling 911, hopefully someone that's trained in basic first aid. So these are things that, again, it's always a good idea to have someone trained in first aid, CPR, things along this line. But you also might want to consider having an AED if you've got a group of workers that are away from medical attention. You're thinking of those things where every minute counts. So again, as part of your training for your crew, especially with supervisors or leaders, have people trained as well, the true word is first responders. The first responder is a person that is there truly that can, provide that aid, and that's typically the person that's there. What they call first responders are actually usually secondary responders, and that's the people, the MITs and the ambulance. So again, if you've got people working in kind of lone environments away from the populace, yeah, it's a great idea to have people trained, have some first aid medical supplies, and an AED, again, it's not a bad idea. But it really comes down to training and having a good action awareness plan in place.
Great, thanks, Bryan. Hey, Bryan, have you ever seen a hazard assessment include an AED, as part of it, like part of the topics? Is it
Um,
common?
Yeah, in a broad hazard assessment, when usually what we do is, you've heard the old saying of eating an elephant, one bite at a time. Usually we'll chunk down hazard assessments, or I do when I do them. If I go into a facility to do a hazard assessment, I'm looking at the work people are doing. So in other words, if a person is using a grinder, or they're wearing a face shield, things along that line. Then looking at the environment itself, slip, trip hazard, all this and that. But if you have a lot of workers there, then and looking at the heat and say the age group, then yeah, an AED is a good idea. I don't think you don't get me wrong, it's not something you have to have. You're not going to be penalized for MOSHA for not having one. But where they've come down in price as much as they have, and AEDs are something designed for someone with no training whatsoever. They're almost foolproof these days. So it's not a bad idea. Okay, so to circle back around, it's not typically part of a hazard assessment, but it's something that saves lives, so not a bad idea.
Thank you, Brian. Well, this is an interesting question. I was just talking about this with my wife. Rebecca asks, are tinted safety glasses polarized? Great question.
I can take that one, Jamie. All tinted safety glasses are not polarized. However, all safety glasses that are properly rated according to the ANSI standard do provide protection against UV. The difference between a tinted safety glass, a regular tinted safety glass protects against glare. A polarized glass protects against reflective glare. So think fishermen wearing polarized safety glasses and the reflective glare off the water. So yes, polarized safety glasses are available in the market today. They're a rather expensive product when compared to standard tinted safety glasses because of the manufacturing process with a polarized lens. Getting polycarbonate that meets the standard and is polarized as well is a little bit more tricky and a little bit more costly at the manufacturing level.
Interesting. That'll definitely help my argument with my wife. Thank you, John. All right, Magandi, and hopefully I'm saying that right. Magandi has a question. What are some ways to deal with fog in OSP construction? And I'm not sure what OSP is, but some ways to deal with fog.
This is one of those things where, depending on the level of fog, it might be one of those things where you have to just suspend the operation. Seriously, this is one of those things where if the fog is so great to where you cannot see people, and say there's a struck by hazard as a potential, I would put this as the same category as being out in high winds or something like that. You've introduced a real threat of, say, workers being struck by something, and we just got to wait till the fog clears. I don't know if John, if you have anything to add to that. High visibility and fog is a tough one.
Yes, it is definitely the reflective properties on a vest or garment are going to help with some of that, but again, the fog is a limiting factor certainly in visibility.
Yeah.
All right, let's see here. Norm has a question. What kind of high visibility clothing should be worn in different applications? So maybe talk a little bit about the different, maybe talk about yellow, orange, or the different applications for different high vis. Maybe John, you could answer that one.
Well, basically there's about 3 different garment types. They're classified as off-road, non-highway. So that would be a vest or a shirt that is what has typically been referred to as non-rated, has no reflective striping on it at all, or if it does, it has a minimal amount that does not meet a higher classification standard. There's also roadway type shirts and or vests that usually will meet a performance classification of 2 or 3. A class 2 vest or shirt has a certain amount of reflective material. The addition of sleeves that also incorporate reflective material onto the garment, whether that be a vest or a shirt, will now take that garment from a class 2 to a class 3. And then one that's a little bit less known, or at least in the industrial safety market, is the garment type P, which is public safety. And they are also available in class 2 and or class 3. And the public safety products they have a shorter length on the waist. For example, think of a police officer directing traffic, and they have to be able to get to their gear belt, whether that be their sidearm, communication device, flashlight, baton, whatever. So a public safety vest or shirt in a class 2 or 3 would have a shorter hip. Now, as far as colors, whether a vest is orange or lime, or whether it's a two-tone with a contrasting stripe, they all meet the same standards. So it's just color preference. Many of you see construction crews probably on a daily basis, if they're anything like my hometown, or doing something on the side of the road. Many times you'll see orange, and then you'll go for a while where you see nothing but lime. It's strictly preference for the contractor. So if you're, for example, if you are on a road crew, typically class 2 or class 3 is the minimum requirement where there is traffic present. I remember in a slide back in the beginning, there was someone directing traffic in a construction parking lot. That particular vest, I think he was backing up a dump truck maybe, that particular vest would be what we would refer to as an off-road, non-highway garment. That was not a class 2 vest. However, the people you see 9 times out of 10 on the side of the road laying asphalt or doing construction, they're wearing a class 2 or a class 3 garment.
Awesome. Thank you, John, for that great information. Let's see. Mahmoud has a question here. I hope I get this right. I think choosing safety glasses for workers should be according to certain rules put by the health and safety, the HSE team. Bryan, can you talk a little bit about the need for safety glasses in different situations, who's responsible for providing them, and then maybe refer to some OSHA rules around that if you can? And maybe John, if you could jump in there too. Good question, Mahmoud.
Yeah, and this is one where, John, I'm sure you'll definitely be able to add to it. From my knowledge and experience in making sure that people have the right PPE, again, OSHA requires that if a person needs, say, PPE like hearing protection, eye protection, which usually isn't that costly, that the employer provide it and actually provide even some choices for them, because everyone has different needs, different comfort levels. But when it comes to safety glasses, the main thing is that you match the glass up with a threat. So, again, usually it's just a good basic, and remember, ANSI rates these. So in other words, if you have safety glasses, they're being sold as safety glasses, they have to meet certain ratings and classifications. So, making sure that it's compliant with the manufacturer standards to meet, the needs established by, NIOSH or OSHA, then you're okay. But other things you might want to look at is if you have high humidity, then it's not a bad idea to look at safety glasses that maybe have an anti-fog factor to them, or for workers outdoors, if that's an issue, that do act with ultraviolet protection or UV protection, things along that line. Typically, for my experience, again, the 3 classifications or maybe 4 classifications when it came to safety glasses, other than, again, making sure that they are rated as true safety glasses, that, again, you have some that are just lightweight and comfortable. You might have some that will go over prescription glasses, and then you have some that are safety goggles. Again, if someone is using something where there's dust particles or things along that line, and for outdoors, again, that's definitely something that can happen. Again, good dust goggles, which are vented and maybe have anti-fog, are also great to have. Now, remember, in a lot of cases, they're going to have that secondary protection anyway. If they're using a grinder or something along that line, they've got to also have a face shield over the safety glasses that provides that additional protection. John, you got anything to add to that?
Yeah. The only thing that I would add to that, Bryan, would be the EH&S manager at the end user facility is certainly going to know and have knowledge of what standard they're trying to meet. But as a general rule, if you are examining a pair of glasses to be worn as safety glasses, it's going to be printed on that glass that it meets a Z87 plus standard, and that's what you're looking for, because that is the standard that ANSI sets forth with respect to impact resistance and peripheral coverage. So, and then the other thing that I would add to that with respect to fit over glasses, you certainly, if you require a glass to fit over your prescription glass, then you certainly want to have something that's going to be comfortable and be able to go over the glasses securely. You don't want to create another hazard by trying to protect against a different one.
Yeah, good information. Thanks, John.
Yeah, thank you, guys. Tamara has a question here. Is there a difference in the response between men and women to heat stress? Great question.
Actually, from what I've read, and again, my studies are as a safety manager trying to keep people safe, and I really haven't found anything along that line. Interesting thing is I've looked at studies where you're even dealing with heat and athletes, and you can have a high performance athlete that's in great condition, but they're still got to get acclimated to heat. So fitness level helps you to acclimate sooner, but you still have to acclimate. And I really haven't seen anything where, yeah, there's any difference between the sexes. Our body responds the same way. So again, when you get acclimated, again, your core body temperature will stay lower, your heart rate is under better control, your blood flow level near the skin is more efficient, you'll sweat sooner and more. So really, it's about that acclimation process. If there is any difference, I've never read any or came across any data on it.
Great, and we'll do, I just made a note to do maybe a little bit of research, and then tomorrow we'll follow up with you if that's okay offline, see what we can find out. Great question. Kevin has a follow-up referring back to the medical health surveillance. Kevin is asking, I was referring to medical health surveillance to ensure that the workers are capable and fit for doing the outside work. Can you talk a little bit about that, fit for work and that kind of thing? Thanks, Bryan.
You bet. Yeah, and again, that's not uncommon these days. It would be doing a disservice to hire someone who's not capable of doing, the level of intensity and duration we're going to subject them to. So it's very common for especially larger employers with manufacturing or construction companies to have I can't think of what it's a doctor or a group that's mainly deals with work-related environments to basically put together kind of a checkup to run them through to make sure that they can do the work that you're going to put them in the environment doing. So it would test things like their basic fitness levels, how much they can lift, their grip. As a matter of fact, the last two employers that I've worked with as a safety manager, both of them would have their employees or potential employees screened to this level as part of their hiring process. So they would go to usually a type of wellness practitioner dealing with work and kind of work therapist, and they would run them through a series of tests that kind of replicated the type of work they would be doing to make sure that, again, their fitness level was good enough. Like I said, if you're hiring someone that is incapable of doing the type of work or handling the intensity or duration, then yeah, we're doing them a definite disservice. So more and more companies, I think, are doing that, doing a type of a verification with them before actually even hiring them. So something definitely to look into.
Thank you, Bryan. All right, we have 2 more questions only on the docket here. So if you've got one, 10 minutes left in the session, so get them in while you can, and we'll get to Tiffany's question here. Can you provide a link to the work zone stats? Bryan, are you able to provide a link, and we can email that out in the follow-up?
Yes, yeah, sure.
Well, that was easy. Alrighty,
and
and then what's that, Bryan?
Oh, I was going to say also, there are a lot of organizations that measure that, from the U.S. Board of Labor to NIOS, ANSI, even I think the CDC watches this to a degree. So you can do a Google search and come up with tons. But yeah, I'll definitely get the link out.
Awesome, thanks, Bryan. All right, looks like it's the last question. Mike is the lucky one. You mentioned water for heat-related illness. What about electrolytes?
Yeah, I'd say that goes with that duration and intensity. Again, the more we sweat, the more we're going to deplete our body's electrolytes, and we definitely have to replace those. So yeah, if you're doing hot work for long periods, you definitely want some fluids with electrolytes in them, or provide powders or something to replace them. Because yeah, you're absolutely right, it is an issue.
All right, and here, I guess there is one last question here from Shola, and this could be either for Bryan or John. Would you advise organizations to conduct test fit for all PPE being issued to the workforce, and how do you think these should be done? So that's a great question, and if I can just tack on a little follow-up, women in construction, women in the industry wearing PPE, that's been a factor that I've recently seen quite a bit. So if you guys can talk about the fit and who does that, and maybe what the best way is that the best way to get that done is. And I don't know, John, maybe you could talk a little bit about PPE exclusively for women, if you've seen that or heard about that. Thanks, you guys.
Nothing specific to women. However, there's been a large, pardon the pun, variance in sizes offered over the last few years. I mean, there are sizes from small all the way up to 7XL. So, in many products. So, for whatever Bryan is getting ready to add on to that with respect to where and when it should be done, from the manufacturing side, we can certainly accommodate all the needs that there may be from a sizing perspective.
Yeah, I appreciate that, John. Yeah, from a safety manager or trainer perspective, again, what it still goes down to what we talked about in the webinar, that we tried to provide the right PPE, including sizing, that's comfortable and fits the needs of the individual. And so usually on hand, we could take care of most people by having lots of different size gloves. Again, you'll find that the majority of people kind of fall into certain categories, but there have been times where I've had to special order, larger vests or different gloves because, again, just the individual. So, you're doing your best to meet their needs in terms of, like John mentioned with the glasses, we don't want people miserable wearing the PPE. We want them to be able to focus on the work that they're being paid to do without, being miserable because this vest is too tight or these gloves, are too tight on them or whatever. So, and to be honest, when I did get into kind of a conundrum, I would rely on the people like John. I call my distributor or someone in the industry and, hey, I've got this issue. What do you think? What are the options that you have to help me out?
No, that is great. Thank you, Bryan. Well, it looks like we are at the end of the question portion. We have no more. So thank you everybody for getting your questions in, and thank you, Bryan and John, for answering them. Really, really appreciate it. So Bryan, any final words before we sign off?
Yeah, I'd like to thank everyone again for tuning in. I realize once again how busy we all are. So to take time for a safety webinar is a commitment in time, and I really appreciate you giving this attention. This was one of those webinars that I really enjoyed. Again, a lot of good information, and working outside can introduce a whole new set of hazards. So it's great that you're giving time and attention to this. I want to thank safetynetwork.me. And also Safeopedia for providing this. And once again, Cordova Safety Products for, again, making all this information available. And also, John, thank you. Thanks for bailing me out with some of those questions that there's no way I'd have been able to answer. Again, as an end user and safety person, I would always go to the manufacturers and distributors who have the real information. So thank you.
Oh,
Absolutely. Just thank you to everyone who took the time to participate today. We at Cordova appreciate our partnership with SafetyNetwork.me and Safeopedia in the presentation. And Jamie and Bryan, thank you for providing the platform. Hope everybody has a safe day.
Great, thank you guys. Yeah, and I second that. Thank you to the audience. Without you, none of this would be possible. Cordova Safety Network, you guys are the ones, you're helping keep this information free to the end users forever. So that's really wonderful. Thank you for putting this together. Bryan, as always, amazing, great job. Can't thank you enough. And special shout out, Krista, we know you're out there somewhere. Thank you. You're behind the scenes, but you're working really hard. Tiffany as well, you're out there somewhere, and can't thank you enough. So thank you to everyone. So with that, everybody go have a great and safe day and weekend, and we'll see you on the next one. Take care, everyone.